Hi, everyone. Today, we're here to talk about Fictionary and first editing, and we've partnered so that we can help editors become exceptional. So I'm Kristina, I'm the CEO of Fictionary, and I'm also the creator of Fictionary. And this is JoEllen.
Hi there, my name is JoEllen. I'm with First Editing. We do professional editing services worldwide, and we are proud to join up with Fictionary.
So today, what we wanted to share a little bit is, the exciting news that First Editing is the very first and only Fictionary certified story coach company. And I'll just say a little bit about how we got there. So we at Fictionary, we developed Fictionary to help writers, and we quickly discovered to help writers, we also had to help editors become exceptional too. So when they're helping a writer, it's just fantastic. And so at Fictionary, we knew we had to reach out to another editing company that had that background, and that's how we got where we are today. And so, JoEllen, maybe you could just talk about what it was like to become a certified company.
Well, we've always offered copy editing, line editing, and a bit of content editing, but we've never gone deep in depth with the fiction story editing. When you get into the story arc, the point of view, the character developments, the fine details like the objects in the scene, all of those things are important, but you can start and be strong with them. But what happened was when we found out about Fictionary and we saw the tools that they were using, that basically quantifies everything that needs to be included, and it makes each editor keep focus without losing anything. It's kind of like that checklist, when the pilot starts off, that they have to check off everything to make sure that everything's safe and complete and you get to your final destination. And that's how we've used Fictionary, because we take the skills. Not anybody can fly a plane. Of course, you still need the professional editor to understand what they're looking for and have the experience and the training, which is so vital. But as we used and implemented this new story coach tool, it allows us to go in and be very meticulous and very comprehensive, more so than we've ever done before. And not saying we haven't done our job, but this really changes the game for everyone. And I think there are just millions of people out there right now, as we speak, typing and creating their book. So you need all the best tools you can, not only as a writer, but as an editor also. So we have been very proud to come on board, and I felt very strongly that everyone should be certified to use this product so that we can do it the right way.
So I love the pilot analogy, and I'll tell you why. Story editing is the hardest form of editing. It's really complex, and it's where creativity joins with technical competency. And for a person to contain a whole novel inside their head and remember everything is really difficult. And so when it's organized, like we've done it within our Story Coach product, the editor can bounce back and forth really quickly. They can see what they've looked at and not looked at for a scene. If a scene's not working, they have a place to go, okay, what elements are not working within that scene or are not being used, so that they can then have a way to be very specific and tell a writer how to fix it, so that, the pilot needs to know what they need to know to get going. Well, a writer also needs very specific information on how to make their story powerful, and not vague advice like you need to make your protagonist likable. Well, who knows how to do that? That's really difficult, right? So unless you're told. So I like that analogy because it is a very difficult task. And I don't think many writers maybe really understand how hard it is to be a really good story editor.
Right. And I think it's great for the collaboration, because what we do as a follow-up after you've done your story coach edit with First Editing is that then we open up the back end to Fictionary and let them go in and see all the tools that have been used, and it allows them to work within that system, to see the same reasons why we're doing that, to see that story arc, to see the strength of their characters, strengths of their chapters, and why we're suggesting what we're suggesting, and how we can do that. And allows the editor to spend more time on those specifics, telling them, okay, yes, you want to make them more likable. Here's a good point. Here's a point. And so you can continue with that. And I think that's really good. And it also, in that collaboration, you know, everyone's different. Some people like to fill in all the blanks, other people don't. So I think it allows those who want to do it themselves, gives them a little bit more freedom and control if that's your need. But for those who really need help getting it done, then they can start from that point and they can take their revisions the next level and really work in a more unified and very focused manner, so that when they come back for line editing, that they know exactly why we're cutting and chunking. Then we can take a look at the grammar, spelling, punctuation, and all those other smaller, you know, the craft of writing in the English language versus the craft of creating the story.
Right. And I love that last point, because a writer also needs to understand what type of editing they need. So I'm wondering, when a writer comes to first editing, how do you evaluate and tell them, well, you need a story edit, you need a copy edit, you need a proofread, where they're at in their writing journey?
Right. The writing journey is very difficult for people to understand, but basically you have those three levels of editing. You have the copy, line, and content editing. And story editing is basically that substantive developmental edit at the content level. So once we know that they need that kind of level, if they're still in the developmental stage, means that they're still doing their outline, they still have a lot of questions, they haven't fully implemented all of their characters or their perspective, they haven't wrapped it up. Doesn't mean the story doesn't exist from beginning to end. What it means is that it just doesn't have, it still needs more meat on the bone, perhaps, if we're going to play with it. And so we ask that each writer send us their full manuscript, and we'll take a look at it and we'll give them a professional recommendation of line editing, content editing, or copy editing based upon where they have. And when we're dealing with people this level, it's really, copy is the final one before your formatting. So we're not even discussing that. But do you need a line edit? That's when you're in your revision stage. You're doing it again, you're going back and forth, you're tweaking words, your transitions, your subject verb agreements, you're just trying to make the voice sound strong and the language to flow. But when you're dealing with that story edit, we're still dealing with the overall concepts and the big pieces of the puzzle that create the beautiful picture that we're trying to make sure that we have. So we'll take a look at that, and based upon where you are in the writing process and how strong of a story that you have at that point, then we'll make a professional recommendation. And that is recommendation, I must say, is not only for yourself but for us, because for us to deliver anything less than what you need is not only a disservice to you as a writer, because you're not getting, you know, a fully developed manuscript, but as an editor, we can't do that, because really it looks poorly on us. Why would you do so little when it obviously needed more? So again, it's basically the proposal of, shall we work together or not? And, you know, there's a lot of editors to choose from, so it's up to you. But we feel strongly that we need to review it and that you can understand where we're coming from. And of course, Story Coach, the whole method, helps us to perform that even better.
Yeah, and so up to this point, the writer hasn't actually spent any money. Is that correct?
No, the sample is free. The sample is free. So we offer that, and it allows us to assess which editor is best for you, and also how much time and energy and that's going to take.
Right. So that in itself is a terrific service, because I'm sure many writers don't quite know where they are and what they actually need from an edit. So that to me is something right out of the gate that's really valuable. And then they can go on and know, you know, I've edited many books, and some come in and I think, ooh, I shouldn't be story editing you because you're ready for a copy edit. The story is just fantastic. And others come in at the other end of the spectrum, and I should be editing for you because you really need a story edit. And so it's really nice, I think, for a writer to get that understanding of their own work when you really can't see it yourself as a writer.
Absolutely. And I think it's also good, you know, that you have the opportunity to work with several different types of editors, because each editor is an expert in a specific skill, and they're trained and they have different experiences and they're vetted for different purposes. So again, not all of our editors are certified Story Coach editors. That was a process in itself. So that weeded out those who were prepared for it and those who weren't. And that was additional training on top and far and beyond. So they're individual individually certified, not just the company, but they're individually trained. And that's really important. So a line edit training and experience is so different from story edit, which is, fiction and really digging into the storyline and the flow.
Yeah, and obviously I totally agree with that because I've created the whole certification program to train editors. And that's a very good point that we, JoEllen and I, we spent 4 months going through the process of training all of the editors that work for First Editing and we're interested in becoming story editors, or we're already story editors and we're interested in upping their game and really delivering an exceptional product to their clients. And so that in itself was a really fun experience, going through and training everybody and making sure everybody is ready and evaluating the manuscripts that they edited. And that was great. And so now we have this pool of resources. So JoEllen, if somebody wanted to use First Editing for a story coach edit, how would they go about doing that?
You come and join us on firstediting.com and you can just submit your manuscript for that free sample we mentioned about. And you can do it simply that way, or you can talk to one of our client administrators who will basically walk you through the process, and they're available on chat or phone or email. So we're always there. We're live. We do believe in the one-on-one consultation and the one-on-one communication, which I think is lacking. As much as we like to implement all of this artificial intelligence and these apps and these tools, which really help us become better, I am a firm believer that humanity still remains number one priority, and working individually with each author is unique. So again, we encourage you to reach out to us and tell us about your story, because it's your baby and we're very proud to help you get it to the next stage.
Nice. Okay, so that was First Editing. You can see it on joellen'stshirt.com. Yeah, so I wanted to we'll close out with just a little bit of thing about humanity. So storyteller is for writers and story coach is for editors. And it's based on AI and natural language processing, but it's developed not to replace humans. It's developed to help people be better at what they do. So we're really proud of that. And we love the fact that it's bringing a whole bunch of people around the world together, becoming better at something. So JoEllen and I are kind of kicking off a little series here. And what we're going to do is do very short videos with editing tips for everyone who's interested from an editor's perspective. So you can see what we see when we're looking at manuscripts. And so we're really thrilled that you're here today with us. And we're looking forward to answering any of your questions if you put them up on the little, below in the comments section here on YouTube, down there. We're happy to answer them. And we really wish you the best in creating a wonderful story.
Thanks for joining us today.